You think we'll see $10 million Bitcoin with today's purchasing power anytime soon?
I don't see how we don't see 10 million, 20 million. Like, we already have a 10 million, yen Bitcoin, right? How far off are we in pesos? Like, are we a 2x or a 3x away in pesos? Like 10 million? Yeah, why so bearish, man? Like, how about 50 million? How about 100? It is inevitable. Wealth will transfer to the scarcest, most valuable asset. There is literally zero things on planet Earth more scarce and valuable than Bitcoin.
What happens when most of society comes to the realization that, like, wait a second, if I take self-custody of my Bitcoin, I have the power?
Bitcoin is the gunpowder. It's the better version of someone else having access and control of your money. And so those that do not embrace that will perish. The politicians are in a state right now where they print or they cause mass catastrophe and failure. The only way out of this is by holding an asset that's better than the sinking ship. The sinking ship is the money that everybody currently, the entire system is working on a sinking ship right now.
Yo, it's 2025. It's been an absolutely crazy year in Bitcoin. I mean, start of the year. I think the rest of the year is going to be absolutely incredible. Today, I'm joined with the CEO and founder of Bitcoin. Wow, man, thank you so much for joining me on Simply Bitcoin IRL.
It's great to be here, man. This place is amazing.
Yeah, dude, thank you so much for coming to my side of the town. I really appreciate it. I hope you've been enjoying yourself so far. And
Yes.
It's been a wild year in Bitcoin, man. I think it's underperformed to a lot of people's expectations.
Yeah, man, I think Bitcoin has a way of taking expectations, putting them into like a meat grinder, grinding it up really good, smashing it down, and then spitting out something else. And I think that's what we've seen so far in 25. I think obviously we expected SBR, we got SBR, but it turns out, Bitcoiners maybe didn't really want SBR. They wanted number to go up. And so we aren't getting that nice release that we were expecting from all the positive sentiment because it's not coupled with price action. I think that's showing how early we are. We are so incredibly early in Bitcoin, in people's understanding of what Bitcoin is. And I think that people like you and I look at this and we text and it's like, hey, cheap sats, like we get to stack more. This is amazing. And I think that broadly, probably we aren't seeing that as much. People are hindered by the lack of an immediate number go up. And so underperformed, yes. That said though, I mean, my goodness, can you imagine in 25 years how it's going to, in 25 years when, the US government or whomever is paying off their debt, how many hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt at that point?
I think Bitcoiners are spoiled though, Adam, because I don't think we're used to that 25-year time scale, right?
Yeah.
We all talk about low time preference, but especially from your era, man, you're class of 2013, right? I'm class of 2016. Back then, the volatility happened to, it happened to be a little bit more positive, right? And things happen to happen in a much shorter time frame. They're a little bit more extended, or that's what it seems like, right? I still think we're gonna get, what Samson Mao calls the Omega candle.
Dude, I actually have a bet out right now with someone on Twitter. I forget who it is, but 100K sats that will see 500K in 2025. I'm bolt hard.
I think that too. I mean, I've been making it like full caps on Twitter, like just tweeting out just because of the SBR stuff.
Yo.
Like, I think the initial executive order, a lot of people were underwhelmed because it included, a lot of the altcoins.
Yeah. He reneged that though recently.
I know, Trump came through. Yeah. Like, he freed Ross, ended Operation Choke Point 2.0. Yeah. The strategic Bitcoin reserve is only a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
What do you think, like, what were the back end games there where he's fully like, what did he had XRP in there, he had ETH, he had, his original tweet was only, these garbage coins.
So I kind of have some some backroom talk. Essentially what was happening at that moment was that there was a tremendous amount of lobbying pressure from the XRP lobby. And people
you mean the decentralized?
Yeah, exactly, right? So decentralized, it needs a lobby and a CEO. Yeah. But that's what was happening in the background, and a lot of people didn't see that. And what I posted was essentially like, look guys, like as Bitcoiners, we completely underestimated the altcoin lobby. However, it doesn't matter because everything goes to zero against Bitcoin anyways.
Yeah, naturally.
So, but I mean, I think it was like 3D chess. Like it was like, kind of teasing them, saying, of course we're gonna include Cardano and XRP and ETH. And at the end, it was Bitcoin only.
Yeah.
And Brad Garlinghouse had to sit on the meeting, which was absolutely hilarious. What do you think is the significance of the SBR? Like, do you think, because like clearly no short-term significance whatsoever, but I think long-term, I completely agree with you. I would not be surprised that by the end of the year, we saw 500K Bitcoin.
Yeah, man, I think significance of SBR is challenging for me. Like I'm a Canadian, and so watching this, my first kind of feeling is jealousy. I'm infinitely jealous that, once again, the Americans have seemingly better everything, including a government willing to adopt and support Bitcoin. As you know, and many people probably know, like I'm permanently debanked in Canada. I do not have the luxury of a checking account. My wife is missing bank accounts. And so Operation Choke Point is really the thing that I think is very, very meaningful. And I think the true benefit of the SBR moves away from just number go up and pay off the debt. There's probably fiat games that can be played to pay off the debt. I mean, Japan is playing them poorly, but is playing them. I think that the actual benefit is that Bitcoin entrepreneurs now have comfort that in America, they're going to be maybe not looked after, but at least not targeted. Like I am actively targeted in Canada. There is a massive target on my chest, Bitcoin entrepreneur for now 12 years. The government does not like that. The banks do not like that. There's a reason, you and I were chatting even last night, like Bitcoin or Canada has some of the most per capita Bitcoiners on the face of the earth.
Oh, it's crazy.
And it's just because we have to be. But we're not getting a new wave of Bitcoiners right now. And it's only because it's so difficult to be a Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada versus now with the SBR and, no more choke point, et cetera, the government completely legitimizing it here. I think that's the only thing the government needs to do is just get out of the way.
Absolutely.
And, if you're going to have an opinion, make it based in facts. And I think that the Trump admin has done that pretty well, and the SBR just adds to that. So I would say, yeah, it's just going to increase competition and benefits for entrepreneurs here.
And I agree, because I remember like last year, there was moments in time where I was like, oh my God, like I might have to move to El Salvador because Operation Choke Point 2.0 was getting scary. And all the things that were happening behind the scenes that they weren't admitting to, like they were actively debanking people. Now I want to circle back to what you were saying about you being debanked. How do you get debanked and manage to run a publicly traded Bitcoin company? How does that work?
Yeah, man, it's not easy. Our story of going public actually was pretty interesting. When we went public, it took us almost a year and a half, or just over a year and a half, and it cost us like over $2 million just to do it. Typically, it should take 4, maybe 6 months, and shouldn't cost even $1 million. And that was strictly because of the Bitcoin, and then because we're non-custodial, like the securities commissions just couldn't understand that we never had custody of funds. And so it was confusing. But I think like I'm building a product that I need in Canada. And so I live on Bitcoin, and it's kind of just the only way that you can live. It's like when I talk about Bitcoin and self-custody being some, unconfiscatable money that only you can have access to, I'm speaking from experience. And I think now more than ever, like in Canada especially, we saw the trucker protest a couple of years ago. We watched people actively losing banks. Like there's horror stories of people just donated $50 because, oh, my uncle's a trucker and I wanted to donate $50 to the truckers. Not knowing the political, turmoil happening behind the scenes. Then, the single mom, her bank is shut down and she can't pay her rent and she's got eviction notices coming and the power is getting turned off. And it's like really, really dire consequences because someone has the kill switch on your bank. And it's catastrophic. And so, in Canada especially, having ways to move money around without the government, saying yes or no is super important. And so how do I do it is literally with Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin and self-custody. And I'm probably lucky that there were no, like when, 2013, there was no custodial wallets. There was no place to leave your coins. I just kind of was forced, like my first Bitcoin wallet was a node. That was the only one that existed. And then we got like this, janky blockchain.com app, which then hilariously Apple banned. And I remember phones with the blockchain app post Apple ban, like I was not updating my phone. I was like, this is sacred. Like I've got this Bitcoin on here. I'm not going to lose this app. And so it's just, I'm kind of steering away from the like original question maybe, but the ethos of the only thing that has protected me and my family and to be able to live and buy a vehicle and a house and this stuff is strictly Bitcoin and self-custody. That's the only thing that's been reliable for me.
No, and I think you really you show that in the way that you've built your company, which from my perspective, I think it's the much harder way, because the easier way would be to build a platform that allows individuals to keep the Bitcoin on the platform, right? It makes it much more accessible for, let's say, someone that has spent most of their life in the fiat matrix, and they're just like, the idea of taking self-custody of their wealth and enabling their independence in the process is such an alien concept to them. You decided to do it the right way, right? Which sets up the right incentives right from the beginning. For anyone who doesn't know, Bitcoin Well is a self-custody by default on-ramp. So essentially what that means is, you can't buy Bitcoin on the exchange if you don't intend to take self-custody. You guys don't hold people's Bitcoin. Why do you decide to do it that way? Because I feel like the critique is like, man, like you're essentially, you're not targeting the biggest potential customer base. Why did you decide to make it the right way, which is self-custody by default?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say because I like wanted to have, you know, this altruistic vision of philosophy. I think it was just the only way that made sense to me at the time. Like, you know, starting from there, and then we started with Bitcoin ATMs, and then which are just self-custody by nature, and then we wanted to bring that same experience to the online portal. And I think at that time when we launched the online portal, I wanted the Bitcoin ATM experience to come online. I don't think I fully acknowledged it was going to be that much harder. In my mind, as someone who'd been self-custodying for a decade at that point, it was kind of like, nah, this is, you know, like, you know how we sometimes forget how early we are, and you know, you look at the bus and it's like, none of these people know. Like, you've got this big secret. And I was a little bit naive in thinking that, you know, 30, 40 million Canadians would be willing and able to self-custody funds.
You regret your decision?
No, not one bit. I think knowing what I know now, I would still make the same decision, simply because what you said, this is the only way that you should be building. Like, it is, Uncle Ben says, like, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, we have a great power. We have the power of knowledge. We know that Bitcoin in self-custody is the better way. We know that it is the safest way. We know that it is the only way. There was someone yesterday on Twitter who was talking about, he has 135 Bitcoin that he has in self-custody, the government wants.
Yep.
And
they're finding him
$10,000 a day. 10 grand a day. And my response to that is like, Bitcoin in self-custody works, because that's not even going to court.
Yeah.
If that's in a custodian, if that's in any Bitcoin exchange, it's just handed over. Yeah. Government is like, hey, by the way, here's the order, here's the guy's name, here's this SSN, like, I want the
And I think the government takes that for granted, and I think that there's still this perception in people that the government has that power. But what happens when most of society comes to the realization that, like, wait a second, if I take self-custody of my Bitcoin, I have the power, right? I think things are really gonna change.
That's the superpower. I've said it many times, it's not number go up. And I think if you want number go up only, like, frankly, like, don't even self-custody. Just like stick to your number go up platform, your like fiat Bitcoin exchange, custodial, like just whatever, it's fine. You don't get to kind of wear the Bitcoin ethos. You don't care about sovereignty. You don't care about generational wealth. You don't care about all the important things. Like, Bitcoin is at most 20% price. At most 80% freedom. And I think that there are lots of things that probably do number go up better than Bitcoin, especially now that we're kind of reaching some sort of critical mass. I think that the most important thing that we have to remember is that we want freedom go up. We want maximum independence. I call myself an independence maxi or a freedom maxi. And I just don't see how these, you know, so-called Bitcoin platforms are custodial, you know, and like, offering a product that they know is wrong under the guise of mass market. It rubs me the wrong way, and I think that as Bitcoiners we have to be better, we have to be stronger, and we have to do more than just like educate and then profit off of the wrong way.
So I want to go back to something that you said earlier in regards to Bitcoin being early, right? You're early to Bitcoin still. I mean, how could you say that, right? Like, you know, you've been a Bitcoin entrepreneur for 10 years now. I think it's been 11 years since you got into Bitcoin in the first place. How can you still say at this point, I mean, you're not really that early if the US government is saying, hey, look guys, like,
we're
probably gonna buy it.
20% or 5%, whatever it is.
Like, you know, you can't be that early. Are you talking about like adoption terms, price terms? And then I'll add a follow-up question to that. Like, what should people expect getting into Bitcoin? Because it's almost getting a little bit boring in a way.
Dude, it's kind of, yeah, you're right. It is getting a little bit boring, and it's interesting you say that.
It's like 5%. Like, it feels like the stock market, man. Like, I feel like Bitcoin Twitter is still operating, and it's 2017. We're about to rip, 20x.
We're all degens looking for
I mean, the market cap is just so big, It's not to say that it can't do it.
Totally.
Like, gold's market cap increased tremendously. But I think it was like 6 trillion.
Yeah, market cap really only works for businesses, not for like commodities or protocols. Gold, oil, Bitcoin, market cap is completely irrelevant because there's no way that we can capture, mass distribution. And I think that's what I mean when I'm early is Bitcoin hasn't hit a mass distribution, not even close. Like, if we just walked anywhere down any street in any city and said, hey, do you have a Bitcoin wallet? I bet less than half say yes. And of the half, or of the, whatever percentage say yes, less than 5% actually have a seed phrase. And when you think about, where is Bitcoin going to go? It's going to go one of two ways. It's going to go to zero, or as the global, monetary policy. And if it goes to zero, it'll be because everyone holds Bitcoin in a custodian or is 6102'd. And if it goes to be global monetary policy, it's going to be because we've mastered self-custody and everyone's comfortable custodying their wealth. For like moving backwards 150 years to gold coins under my mattress, but preferably, not held under your mattress.
Is that possible? Because in my experience, right, it's been like,
there's just some people that it doesn't matter how many times I've showed them, I still end up being like Uncle Jim.
Yeah. The internet tech support. Yeah, no, it's not possible today. It's not supposed to be. And I think that's actually...
Is it the hardware limitations?
No, it's nobody has to change right now to survive. I mean, you think Safety explained this perfectly. The adoption of Bitcoin more akin to gunpowder than to like a fancy iPhone or something like that, where you don't really know who adopted gunpowder last because they're just dead. The history books, they're not in them. Their colony or their citizenship is just gone because they lost. You brought a knife to a gunfight and you lose 100% of the time. And Bitcoin is the gunpowder. It's the better version of someone else having access and control of your money. And so those that do not embrace that will perish. Their bloodline will not have access to wealth. It will be very, very, very difficult for their descendants to have any level of access to wealth. And this fiat world where we can pass wealth from generation to generation without teaching the next generation how to manage it is going to evaporate probably in the generation from our parents to us.
Why so?
Because I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of tax and government authoritarianism where, like, right now we're seeing this narrative play out where we've got the rich are bad and we have to, steal from the rich and give to the needy.
I mean, but that's always been the case.
Right. But it hasn't been paired with, the end of a monetary, like we're looking at the end of fiat. I think we'd agree. Like even in the 70s, even back into the 30s, fiat currency wasn't as bad as it was, as it is right now. And so when you look at a generation of people who have, now for 2 generations just received account statements and a built-in manager, and it became somebody else's problem to train up a new manager, oh, hey, I'm leaving, but Bob's here and he's been at the firm for 20 years and he's going to look after your kids. And it's like, awesome, Bob. Where's my ribeye steak? Thank you very much. I'll go to a ball game with you and, you can manage my $35 million. And I think that that's going to completely disappear in favor of Bitcoin in self-custody. And when it does, it will be our parents passing wealth to us. Because people our age, I'd say half of them are comfortable with self-custody. And I think that the generation coming up is more comfortable than ever. I am so bullish. I have the girl who babysits my kids who's 16. I'm always talking to her, what's the latest? I'm getting the cool teenager lingo. I'm figuring out how they speak and how they think. And they're freedom maxis, man. They understand. They're not bought into the liberal brainwashing that I think that our generation kind of was exposed to and was bought into. They're not. They are digital natives. Yeah. And they have no problem money being in the cloud. And they're incentivized to want to learn how to manage that, because I think they understand what's going on. And so I'm super bullish on self-custody, not because your grandma is going to self-custody. Frankly, your grandma doesn't need to self-custody. Like, she's 15 years, like, I don't know your grandma specifically, but like, grandmas in general are probably fine. Our parents probably have us, so they're okay, but our generation and younger, consider this a direct call out to learn how to self-custody.
So I'm of that belief too, right? And I think it's because, again, the class that you're from, right? But as Bitcoin continues to go up in value, I don't think everybody's going to have the luxury of being able to deal with the main chain just because of essentially being outpriced. I mean, what would your response be to that?
Yeah, I think layer 2 is to be determined still. There's two real prominent players right now in Liquid, which is kind of a hybrid custodial solution, federation style, and Lightning. I think that I'm probably more in the camp of Lightning because I'm technically capable to set up a Lightning node and balance.
Now, Lightning's great, but it's not ready for.
It's not ready
for what I'm saying.
Completely, not even close.
Because it takes away the entire reason. Like, all of a sudden we're back to square one. You're relying on a custodian.
Yeah, man, completely. And in both scenarios, so you either have to be technically adept to be able to set up a Lightning node and balance the channels and manage the channels and be able to spend in self-custody, or you have.
So is Bitcoin destined for only a few people to have self-custody of their Bitcoin?
No. I think that the layer 2 that wins doesn't exist yet. I think that we're going to see some sort of, dude, think about how easy it is to self-custody Bitcoin today, even compared to 2016.
It's significantly easier.
And bro, let me tell you, 2013.
The wallets, they didn't exist. 100%.
Like, it is, yeah. and why, right? It wasn't necessarily one company or one initiative, but collectively, the industry, the free market, if you will, identified, Bitcoin wallets suck and we should make them better. And, tons of open source software, tons of guides, tons of tutorials, like just so much stuff coming out. And what do you know? Like, now you download, like Blue Wallet or, any other self-custody open source software, 2 buttons, write down your words and you're good.
Yeah.
And I think that, look at even like the BitKey that launched that's maybe controversial, but is seedless and self-custody focused. There is people and are people innovating in the space that I think have the right incentive and the right motive that want to see Bitcoin scale. We all understand, our sacrifice of having UTXOs. And I am very, very, very convinced that layer 2, whatever it may be in the future, I don't think it will be Lightning. I don't think it will be Liquid. I think it will be some other kind of combination thereof is going to work. And who knows? It could be like Liquid, like Federation style inside smaller communities where you just have like Federation bridges. Like I said, that's not my field. Whatever the smart people do, I'm going to adopt at Bitcoin Well, but wipe my hands. But as someone who's been in the space a long time and has seen the innovation, I am very, very, very convinced Bitcoin will scale. Bitcoin is for everybody, or it won't work as a reserve currency.
It has to be but it isn't for everybody on the main chain.
Guys, I want to tell you about our sponsor, bitcoinwell.com. It's the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. What makes Bitcoin Well different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, which means as soon as you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well and the funds clear, they go straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. Enable your independence today with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin in Canada and the United States. Head over to bitcoinwell.com to get started.
I think eventually, and maybe not everybody, but it is for every bloodline, it is for every generation on the main chain. I think that we have to think about the downstream effects of a Bitcoin standard and how it aligns incentives, how it doesn't allow for frivolous spending. It doesn't allow to not teach your kids. Like, how many people right now have so many, have their 2 kids or whatever the standard is, and they just dump them in the school system, don't teach them about saving or budgeting or smart spending or time preference, and ultimately just, their kids get brainwashed by the state and then off they go to make the same mistakes. That is not possible on a Bitcoin standard simply because the incentives do not work. When you've got this low time preference and you instill that in generation, let's call it generation 1, our children's generation is generation 1 in this example. We're going to be passing down Bitcoin to them. And let's say we're starting right now. We're starting at ground zero right now. We make 100%. And we, spend 90 and 10% of our income goes into layer 2 and it's sitting there. And we do that for 30 years. Probably as part of our succession, our life succession, that 30-year accumulation in layer 2 goes on the main chain, and it's there. And hopefully that child does the same thing and is stacking, and then that goes, onto the main chain. And so I agree. The main chain is probably not to use, every year, or like I consolidate UTXOs quarterly. That won't be a thing in 20 years. But you know how the Jewish have like the bar mitzvahs and this becoming a man. You will be becoming a man when you have your coins transferred from layer 2 to the main chain. This is a celebration. Get the cake, get the bubbly water. Like, this is a big deal.
So, okay, and let's talk about like the long term, right? So do you agree with Hal Finney's post? You think we'll see $10 million Bitcoin with today's purchasing power anytime soon?
Anytime soon.
I mean, anytime soon in regards to the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Oh yeah, I don't see, unless the government stops printing, I don't see how we don't see 10 million, 20 million. Like, we already have a 10 million, yen Bitcoin, right? How far off are we in pesos? Like, are we a 2x or a 3x away in pesos? Like, yes, because the US dollar and the Canadian dollar and the Australian dollar, we are no better than the peso. We are just a little bit further down or further behind in the life cycle. And so 10 million, yeah, why so bearish, man? Like, how about 50 million? How about 100? It is inevitable that wealth will transfer. Like, wealth is like water. And no one is questioning, does water go downhill? It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And wealth will transfer to the scarcest, most valuable asset. There is literally 0 things on planet Earth more scarce and valuable than Bitcoin. Not gold, not oil, not the US dollar, obviously, not land, not, beachfront real estate. Like, nothing is more scarce and valuable than Bitcoin. And so, yeah, 100%. 10 million, I agree with Hal. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I agree with you as well, too. One of the phenomenons that we've been seeing in developing countries, specifically in South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, is the mass adoption of stablecoins, specifically Tether. I think Bitcoiners had this initial concept that, this is a perfect fix, right? You have an unstable fiat currency, boom, boom, bam, bing, you're going to adopt Bitcoin, makes sense. That's not what the free market is saying. The free market is saying that people want dollars. So do you think that's an educational issue? Do you think stable coins are a threat to Bitcoin? Do you think that my own public opinion is that they're a Trojan horse in a way because it gets people exposed to digital wallets? That phenomenon surprise you at all?
No, I don't think so. The first time I was exposed to stable coins was during kind of the ICO craze in 2017. And I was like, wow, moving money sure got a lot easier. Or moving dollars got a lot easier. I was already very used to, like, my first Bitcoin transaction, real Bitcoin transaction, was buying a Bitcoin ATM in 2013. I paid for it in Bitcoin. Like, I moved money on a Sunday afternoon from my wallet to his, and it was a done deal. And so I was used to this idea that money needed to move. What I wasn't used to was that stable money could move. And I think that it's less of an education thing, especially in these third world countries. But you have to imagine a person who is looking to balance their risk tolerance and their innovation kind of levels. And there's kind of on a bit of a scale. And for us, we have stable currency already in our bank accounts and in our pockets and whatever. And so what we're escaping with Bitcoin is not so much the failing dollar, although that is part of it. That's the number go up part. But it's mostly the freedom. That's kind of what I talked about earlier. Like, what we're escaping is the tyranny in, a developed country that our money can be stolen. That's why Bitcoin is so valuable. They're not escaping that same thing. They are in third world countries, but I think they're more excited about, holy smokes, I finally have access to a stable hence the word stablecoin, a stable currency. And I'm not going to jump from my already unstable currency to another unstable currency in Bitcoin. Obviously, over the long term, Bitcoin's number go up, and I think most stablecoin users would probably agree with that. But they don't yet have the luxury of thinking long term because they are exposed to
paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, man, or not even probably shorter than that. I actually read a thing the other day. Oh, Walmart CEO said that they can see their sales drop on the back half of a 2-week paycheck cycle. People are buying like smaller packages, less food when their paychecks are running out. And that's petrifying for us. But that's how it's been in third world countries for decades, for generations.
Yeah.
And so they're not, forget self-custody, forget, freedom go up. Their version of freedom is just number stability. And so and that's what I mean by early, and also like we have to count our blessings here in North America with how lucky we are that we have, relatively stable footing to sit on and have the opportunity to look at Bitcoin, benefit from number go up, but also, really push for freedom go up.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So you said something earlier, which is really interesting. I want to further explore that topic. Talking about setting up your first Bitcoin ATM 2013, you used Bitcoin to buy the first machine. How do you get from the first machine to how many years later till you went public?
9.
9 years, and then you're a publicly traded company with how many machines now?
160 across Canada or so, but
160 ATMs.
We've moved. At one point it was 300 with partnerships and things. We only own 160, but we operate like many more.
So essentially you 300x'd at peak.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
So how did you 300x?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like I am not very good at traditional business. I was very young when I found Bitcoin, very young wanting to bring ATMs. ATMs felt like the most logical.
You were in your teens, no? Early 20s.
I was 19 when I found Bitcoin, and
That's
then
incredible.
I think I was just 20 when I launched
Good
the
stuff.
first Bitcoin ATM. So yeah, like pretty young. Back then I thought I knew everything, and today I'm like, wow, that guy wasn't a complete idiot. Like, but it was like no business plan. It was just, let's get a Bitcoin ATM.
Honestly, those are the best types of business, bro. You have a dream in your head. You're naive
Yes.
enough to believe.
Dude,
right?
and that was part of it. I had 10 people that I asked, hey, should I do this?
And they're all like, no, this is
10 of them said no.
That is a terrible idea. Of
It's
course.
not safe, it's not stable, we don't know how it's gonna pan out, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't really know why I asked
But
you.
I
Let me
think
do this
all
anyways.
entrepreneurship, like you need a little bit of overconfidence, optimism,
Yeah.
and self-belief. Because if not, it's not going to work.
Yeah, man, and self-belief, but also, and something that I realized later on was like passion and adaptability are probably the only things that you need in when we went public. My friends were calling like to congratulate and like all this stuff. Or sorry, my friends' parents were calling to congratulate, and one of them talking to my dad was like, "Oh man, like I'm just so happy. Adam got so lucky, like getting into Bitcoin." And my dad was like, lucky. He's like, that kid is so frustratingly stubborn. There is no one that hasn't told Adam stop or no.
Yeah.
But the idiot just keeps on, bursting through walls. And like, frankly, man, every single wall can be pushed through. Every single one. I am not convinced, and I have the audacity to say there are 0 problems that cannot be solved with brain power and manpower. And I mean, look at like we have more of that than any time before. Like we are just going to blast problems. And that's ultimately what it was. It was like, oh, you want to run ATMs? No one wants a Bitcoin ATM. So I remember there's this one time, here's the first problem I ever experienced. So the Bitcoin ATM comes to my house. It's really heavy. I like lift it up and carry it up the stairs, like hurt my back. So put it down, set it up. I send 100 Bitcoin to the Bitcoin wallet in there. It's gone. It leaves. And I'm like, oh, that was a good scam. Like, it didn't work very good. And so I call the manufacturer, the guy that sold it to me, and I'm like, dude, like, what is going on? He's like, oh, yeah. We accidentally loaded one wallet onto 50 different machines when we shipped from the factory, and we forgot to wipe that. So someone must have just taken the coins. And I was like, well, that was kind of like, I didn't do a test transaction. It was just like 100.
No, but at the time, it was worth how much?
It would have been like probably a couple $1,000s.
Okay.
Which, like, in today,
Now it's 10 million. Or
well,
what's
yeah, for sure. But even the like couple $1,000s though, like when you're 20 years old,
Yeah, of course.
that's just like, I was like sick to my stomach. I wasn't sure how I was going to recoup.
Yeah.
And so eventually, like, called, he was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, you got to figure this out. And he's like, okay. So we like talk on the phone. He ends up finding the coins. We go through this big, long, the guy that ended up having them was like wanted to feel very important. And we had to have this big, long, drawn out phone call, all this stuff. And then, a week later, I get the coins back. I was like, whoo.
So did he do it on purpose?
Nah, he was just like, oh, coins in the wallet. Like any reasonable person, he did what I don't fault him.
Yeah.
He probably could have handled the situation a little bit better. But with me being like, hey, Like, here's proof that I sent them. They're mine. Can you just put them back, please? But anyways, so that was like problem one. Then problem two was, oh, hey, no one's heard of Bitcoin and no one wants a Bitcoin ATM. So lucky for me, my father-in-law, who also gave me the seed capital for the first ATM and the Bitcoin that were subsequently gone and then returned, he had a pub. And so I was like, great, we'll put the ATM in the pub. And then the third problem was, which is amazing, and we were the first one in Alberta. It was great publicity, I think, for his pub. It was really awesome for me to be able to have a friendly face and whatever. But then, the third problem was like no one wanted to use no one was using the ATM, and so it was a slow grind, a slow build up to end up using it. And but any one of those things could have been like, oh, my coins were stolen. No, everyone was right. Like, this is done. No one wants it. I'm gonna hang it up. Like, you just got to keep on grinding.
What's really interesting too is like those times, those dark times, right? If you survive, and then like honestly, it's very rare that I've ever met an entrepreneur that doesn't eventually succeed.
Totally, man.
What I find more often is someone who gives up. Someone who quits.
Yes.
But if you keep chipping at it, eventually you either have a break or, but you're going to have extremely dark days and pain throughout the entire process. But I feel like that's the price that you have to pay.
Yeah, man. And I think it's healthy. I don't think we want successful people who haven't gone through pain. We definitely need...
I don't think you can be successful if you haven't.
I would agree with you. And I think that as a society, we want the leaders, whether they be business people or leaders in politics or whatever.
And that's not how it works now.
Not anymore, but it used to be.
Because now the way that society works too, and it was recently in Washington, D.C., and it's so like, it's a beautiful city. I have to remember where I am. So it's a beautiful city, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like, essentially like the way that society works now is, there's a popularity contest.
Yeah.
And whoever wins that popularity contest controls the money printer, essentially.
Dude.
And it's crazy. It's a complete, because like in business, right? If you make bad decisions, what happens?
You die.
You go out of business,
yes.
right?
You have to start from zero. You get a massive piece of humble pie, and you start again.
And then you learn what not to do. And then, of course, the free market kind of decides, okay, this guy's really good, this guy's winning, right? So it's like the free market kind of takes care of itself. In the political system, the only feedback mechanism that the government gets, is an election, at least in the US, every 4 years, or every 2 years, kind of House, or whatever.
Yeah.
But for presidents, every 4 years. That's a terrible feedback mechanism.
It's a very difficult. 4 years is also, it's the same in Canada, but it's even worse because it's somehow too short to get anything done.
Yeah.
But then too long because it's got such a long feedback loop. You almost, like in business, if you make bad decisions for 4 years, actually, I don't think you can make bad decisions for 4 years in business. You can do bad decisions for like 6 months, max. And then you just end up, disappearing and no one has heard of you. It's because you have this, like at Bitcoin, well, especially like, I love the short feedback loop of the portal. Even with ATMs, the feedback loop is so long. We discovered that it takes about 8 months for a machine to hit its stride. And so we have an 8-month feed from placing machine on day one. Whatever the machine is doing at 8 months is kind of the cap that it will ever do. And if that's, 50 grand a month, it's like dynamite. But if it's $100 a month, it's like time to yank it. And so we have a place and wait strategy. You have to wait 8 months. On the portal, if we launch, like we just launched recurring buy in the USA, and it's been like a huge hit, which we were expecting. But if it wasn't, that would be, in the first week, if we didn't have our expected uptick, it would be like, oh, hey, why did I think it would? Where did I make that mistake? Let's change, in our future decisions and then make better decisions next week. Like we get to make a better decision next week. We don't have to wait 8 months or 4 years it's like we can take meaningful action now.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, like back to, even like the layer 2 conversation, like we're getting really good feedback currently in Bitcoin, in its digital nature, in its global ability. And I'm just so bullish on the future of this, product or currency or monetary policy.
100%. I mean, like Bitcoin essentially has incentivized the smartest people on earth to come on our side.
Yeah.
Right?
The aligned incentives are
And
insane.
they're just working for their bags, essentially. I think Kaiser says, like, Sailor is the employee of the month. Trump was the employee of the month with the hands. Trump was the employee of the month for February, like without a shadow of a doubt. And I mean, he came through so hard. Like, I remember, the end of 2024. It was put us in a very difficult position because we've always taken a very neutral stance, right? Like, I'm like, look, I don't care if you're left, right, Democrat, Republican, it's all the same thing. And then they arrested the samurai wallet guy.
Yeah, man.
And then like, Simply Bitcoin endorses Trump 2024 and RFK, 2024, 100%. They have, and then so many people in the chat last time was like, why are you guys getting political? I'm like, guys, do you not understand this is survival? I gotta say, we told you so. Right. And I think this is a very interesting phenomenon. This is where it leads me to the next topic, where we're kind of in this weird transition period in politics. I really do believe the theory from the sovereign individual, where information technologies or the adoption of them is going to lead to the eventual death of politics. Like, politics is going to take a backseat in terms of the importance in people's lives. And we're kind of seeing that system go through that transition. Like, what was a really interesting phenomenon to me was how much they fought to control information. Like, Naim Bouquet has a very famous quote from Bitcoin magazine. The name of the article is "Don't Drink the Elite's Kool-Aid." And in that article, he says their most important weapon is their control over the truth. And we saw this. I mean, the mainstream media was like, if it's a tweet, it's misinformation, right? And then at the same time, they're blaming inflation on the weather. Like, it's so absurd, but we saw the collective consciousness of the world as soon as Elon freed the bird, like, wake up. And eventually we reach this critical mass where the majority of people are no longer getting their information on legacy media, which in my opinion is like propaganda for the state.
Yes, 100%.
And most people are doing their own research on social media, for better or worse. I think it's better.
Yeah,
right?
I think
it's the free market of ideas. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, where does politics go from now? Like, where does it go? Like, this is gonna be some crazy times.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally have not only an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to hodl while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you. Check out ledn.io today.
I think it's pretty clear that democracy as we have it doesn't work.
Oh, God.
It's obvious. And I don't know what the right solution is.
What is the alternative?
Well, this is the right question. And I think this is the question that our generation needs to be asking internally and also in conversation, but also we need to be having this discussion with our kids and with the next generation, because it is very clear that the popularity contest to give someone, godlike power for 4 years, and then also restrict it to just one of two sides, like, it's not working.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, right? Like, how else would you get equality? How else would you get, fairness? Like, what would happen to the people that are left behind, right?
Well, I think that we
that's like essentially the main proponents of democracy are like, look, like, there's massive wealth inequality. Democracy fixes that, right?
Yeah, I think that we rely a lot though on someone else. Like, wealth inequality, if we had a nice, naturally incentivized monetary policy, like a Bitcoin standard, let's say, wealth inequality would be, first of all, like, leveled out just by the nature of the value economic system.
You think it would be much better than where it stands today?
Way better, but because it would be more decentralized. But even further so, investing stops to look like fiat gains number go up, and it starts to look like building the world that I want to see. And this can, obviously pose problems. If enough people want to see a bad world, then, they will spend their money on making bad world things. I believe, and this is probably where my optimistic, puppy dog nature comes out, but I do believe that humanity is good. I believe that we have more good in us than evil. As a Christian, I believe that, God has the ability to help us see the benefits of good. And I would love to think, and I think others would join me in thinking, that with monetary equality, meaning everyone has access to the same ability with a value-based, monetary system, they would also start investing in a good world. And you actually probably, one, you want that, but you also want people incentivized to, we're not incentivized to make a good world right now. We are all being stolen from by, inflation, but even deeper than that, we're being stolen from by a third party in fiat money. And when you don't know who is stealing from you, it looks like your neighbor, it looks like your brother, it looks like your friend is stealing from you. And you're being punched in the face and you just can't figure out where it's from. And so you just start swinging. And when you start swinging, you go into, like you said, this self-preservation mode, and you have no ability to look out further. You have no ability or desire to try and fix the world because you're just so focused on maintaining what you have. I think that the future of politics, or in my mind, lack thereof, it doesn't look like a democracy like we know it because it doesn't need to be. The problems that existed, the reason democracy is here is because money was centrally controlled. Like, we've never seen an opportunity for a society to work with an openly fair, democratic money. I just think that we have such a cool opportunity to adopt the principles of Bitcoin, rules, not rulers. Like, I don't know why we don't vote on multiple things. Like, voting, we vote on Twitter like 9 times a day with a poll. We can probably get smart enough to figure out how to, have individuals in a community campaign for certain things. Like, I live in a suburb in Alberta of like 100,000 people. Like, it shouldn't be hard for me to say, guys, why do we have grass? We should have fruits and vegetables here.
So what you're saying is essentially Bitcoin essentially fixes democracy. It's not necessarily that Bitcoin gets rid of democracy. It's that democracy is broken because of fiat, and it's essentially misaligned the incentive structure.
Maybe said differently, Bitcoin actually enables democracy, where right now, I wouldn't call what we have right now democratic. I don't think it's democratic at all. I didn't vote for a carbon tax. Like, actually, literally right now, there's a brand new prime minister that came into Canada.
Yeah.
He's just got in on Sunday. And he is never once been on a ballot sheet, never once been elected at all. The people voted for a party.
Yeah.
And then the party leader was like,
appointed.
Yeah, he was garbage and he left. And then the party leaders appointed someone new. And he's, by the way, a globalist central banker. Like, it cannot get any less democratic than that already. But they're like, oh, this is democracy. Like, you voted for this. Like, I didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for you to shut down the truckers' bank accounts and for you to, lock me in my home because I didn't take a medicine and for you to, like, put a diaper on my kid's face. Like, no. I did not vote for this. And so what is, a democratic system if it's not having the ability to vote on the things that are deeply, deeply important? And, like, can we even call a world that has mass restrictions put upon it in the name of safety? Can we call that democratic if they can just play the safety card? Like, climate emergency, medical emergency, like, we're just giving them, I think they've taken these godlike powers and removed our democratic powers. And I think that Bitcoin kind of throws everything back into the middle. And I think we have an opportunity now to kind of regain our democratic powers from what has been taken.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, specifically if you take self-custody. If you take self-custody, you're reclaiming back your financial sovereignty 100%. You're empowering yourself and you're empowering your family. 100% agree. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. It's going to be, because it's a pivotal moment in human history, really. We're seeing the balance of power shift from the state to the individual. The individual just haven't realized that yet. They don't realize how much power they're really taking back once they take self-custody. It's going to be an interesting phenomenon to see how they try to stop it. I think that this previous election in the United States, I think the stakes were so high because I think both, and again, both parties are not monolithic, right? But I really do believe, like, if you look at one party, they voted essentially for a central bank digital currency. You look at the other party, they're like, oh, Bitcoin, right? Like, it was like, fork in the road, which way are you going, Bitcoin or slavery type of thing. And I'm glad that we went in a certain direction. But again, we're only 4 years away from essentially
In color.
that being reversed, right? So it's very, very interesting. Now, I kind of want to circle back to something that we were talking about earlier in the conversation in regards to essentially us being early and the price, right? So, this year, like I was saying, has been underwhelming. You're anticipating 500K Bitcoin. And I think my question to you is, like, is Bitcoin going to be boring heading into the future? It's very easy for us to be like, you know what, like, this is great. Yeah, I mean, we've been at this for a couple of years. What would you say to someone that was just getting in and they're seeing Bitcoin and, they want to improve their lives? Like, what would your response to them be? Because they're looking at, a lot of the meme coins or a lot of these stocks that has more volatility. They're like, why should it? This Bitcoin thing is boring. Like, the best days of Bitcoin are behind it.
Certainly, I think from a dopamine level, the best days of Bitcoin are behind. And that's a feature, not a bug. I think that if you are coming into Bitcoin because you want maximum dopamine, you're probably not quite ready to be in Bitcoin. I call the altcoins the crypto casino. And there's a reason nobody with who's of sound mind takes their paycheck every 2 weeks, throws it on red, and just sees what happened, right? No one's going to the blackjack table thinking, I'm going to work. Like, I'm a blackjack pro. It's like, no. Luck of the draw. You get the cards. You can know when to place big and when not to. You can play probabilities to your advantage, but you do not have the ability to determine when the card's going to hit and when it's not. And I think that as Bitcoin becomes more boring, it only becomes boring because we have a group of people that collectively believe that the casino, like, I used to love, gambling on the football games and playing cards with my friends, like, very, very fun. I used to get a rush when I played with more money, and I don't anymore. Now I just love the act of doing it. I don't need or want to bet big to win big because I know the risk and the cost associated with that. If 1% of the generation before me thinks this way, maybe 5% of my generation thinks this way, but we're all having kids right now. And so probably 50% of the next generation thinks this way. And then they're gonna have kids, and probably it's 80% after that. And during those generational transfers, dude, they're gonna line up with, the monetary supply basically unchanged. Bitcoin is going to be boring. Bitcoin is going to be the GDP. Like, that's just, what's the market cap? It's like, what's the GDP of the world?
Do you agree with Saylor's prediction where he's saying $13 million base case by 2045?
I mean, I don't think Saylor has, the missing variable here is how much money will be in existence. It's like, I have no desire to predict 20 years down the road because I think 20 years ago, you could have never predicted the M0, like the base money supply in Canada, it quintupled in an 18-month period. Like, who's predicting that? And what if that happens twice more in that same time frame? 13 million? No. It's like 100 million. So yes, like, it's going up because the politicians are in a state right now where they print or they cause, mass catastrophe and failure. And I think that's something that we often ignore as Bitcoiners is the only way, that's kind of the game theory playing out, but the only way out of this is by holding an asset that's better than the sinking ship. The sinking ship is the money that everybody currently, the entire system is working on a sinking ship right now. We've heard the analogy, Bitcoin is the lifeboat. When you run out of lifeboats is when they get more expensive.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that without question, number goes up for the long period. But eventually that stops because we as a society just get so much healthier with our finances. Investing will be a word that does not mean the same thing in 50 years.
100%, because essentially the way that the system works now, right? And I want to talk about essentially the root thing that Bitcoin fixes, right? So essentially the way that investing works now is you're forced to invest just to maintain your purchasing power, which is absolutely ludicrous. But if you want to identify the root cause.
And also, just quickly, that all sounds fine. If that was the case, it's like, fine, just to maintain. I have to invest so I maintain, fine. But it comes with the risk of losing. Like, you have two situations. You either hold or you invest. If you hold, you're guaranteed loss. If you invest, it's 50-50, lose or gain. So you have, of the 3 options, 2/3 of those options, you have a 66% chance of loss and only a 33% chance of gain.
Of money that you worked for,
Dude,
right? Of money that you
pay
paid
tax
taxes,
on.
right? Like, and I think essentially the root cause, right, is inflation.
Yes.
Bitcoin fixes inflation. The more days that Bitcoin survives and the price goes up, it not only proves that money can exist without inflation, it actually proves that money could be deflationary. I know that's not the correct technical word, but just for the sake of the conversation, I think it describes it, right?
Yeah.
Everything essentially trends to zero towards Bitcoin. It's a very interesting phenomenon. You adopt Bitcoin, you start feeling those benefits. Everything starts getting cheaper. Your time preference starts getting larger because you're just like, dude, like, I'll just wait a couple more years and that thing that I want is going to be half off, essentially. Right?
Yeah, man.
So what has inflation in your eyes as a Bitcoiner, class of 2013, what has inflation done to society?
I think it misaligned incentives so poorly to the fact that it has created an invisible force which has eliminated the opportunity for fairness and prosperity. And I think that when you look at a family unit, the smallest form of community, which is, call it even just a partnership, a husband and a wife, that is designed to be in such a way where you have the ability to think about your future and you have the ability to understand and think about what your goals are, make strides towards those goals, and then either achieve or miss those goals, but on your own accord. And probably in that, some of it is kids. But now, your goals probably include a certain number of hours or a certain dedication to a cause. And so as a result, for half the partnership, usually the female variety, you're forced to choose. Do I want to, be a part of those goals and contribute? Because, hey, we decided we wanted to travel like this and have a house like this and drive a car like that and have a lifestyle like this. That's not attainable anymore, like we thought it would be. So now I have to, either enter or re-enter the workforce. And so, you make it work and, thank goodness the government's here and they gave it the, so there's maternity leave and there's systems set up and all the, regulations and like, good. I'm pro like equality in that way. But now we have a generation coming into the world which no longer has the luxury of, a caring individual at the home who is, making good food, educating in a certain way. And so, last generation, what was it? It was like, well, we're just going to eat out a little bit more, right? Our food can come from a box, no problem. So we get a little bit, unhealthy. And so, that creates an incentive to make quick dinners that taste good. And who cares about health? So boom, like fiat food, like there's the apocalypse in health. And then now what we're seeing, even worse, is I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to clean. And these kids are driving me crazy. I don't have the ability myself to even think because I'm, busy at work and doing all my stuff. So I dump the screen into a kid. And these, 8-month-old, 2-year-old, 5-year-old kids are buried in their screens from an early age. So we're at the point where their dopamine receptor, they don't ever properly learn how to think, how to be bored, how to have an imagination, how to be a kid and how to develop their brains in a certain way. And so that's this next generation coming in. And even me, like my parents were, relatively good with screen time. We're like at our house, we're super strict on it, but my brain is fried. My dopamine receptors are fried because of the dopamine that I receive as like a 30-year-old man. Like what does that do to a 6-year-old?
Yeah.
And it's so often like, oh, your kid's crying? iPad. Yeah. Your toddler won't sleep? Show in the bed. No problem. So what has it caused? It's like, what didn't it cause, man? Like, as a result that we have a broken monetary system, we have families that can't support themselves on a single income, which forces, both, parents into the workforce, which removes the attention from the child.
More reliance on the state.
Yes, exactly. Like, so now I'm on food stamps and like, it's just, where do we end? Like we end up like Wall-E.
Yeah, I mean it's very dark. We end up in slavery. Like essentially that's what it is. Like I mean like it's essentially a coercive system. It's a system based on theft.
Yes.
Most people don't see that. And if it's a system based on theft, it needs coercion in order to function. And the more theft occurs, the more tyrannical they become. Like, I remember there was this law that was passed, or they tried to pass it during the infrastructure bill. And essentially it was monitoring every $600 transaction had to be reported to the government.
Crazy.
Meanwhile, you know, Doge is getting in there and they're just discovering all this type of misallocation and just blunt fraud, right? That no one agreed was, you know, a good idea to spend on. And, you know, essentially they're screaming bloody murder. They're saying, like, how could you audit the government? So, like, let me get this straight. They can audit you at any moment. If not, you go to jail. But the moment you decide to say, hey, like, what are you doing with my tax dollars? Like, you can't know.
Yeah, and who do they work for? Like,
Yeah.
who is the government installed to protect and serve?
I think as long as it's a fiat standard, it's a government by the government for the government. And I think that's really what Bitcoin fixes. It aligns incentives in society again. And that's a really, really beautiful feature. And I think that's what we're fighting for.
Dude, it's crazy, just quickly on that, it's crazy how politicized the Doge, like the Department of Government Efficiency is. Like, it's wild to me that there are just facts. Like, here's the receipts. Here's the problem. Here's the receipt. And half the country is like, how dare you? And it's like, regardless of who this is, like, I was in a chat with some friends and they were talking about this. And he was like, don't think you wouldn't be skeptical if it was Biden or if it was Trudeau on the other side of the Doge. It's like, sure, be skeptical. But when someone comes with a receipt and says, here's a fact, here's a problem, we got rid of it. That's a good thing. I don't care what your last name is. That's just a good thing.
I think unfortunately, a big percentage of people are essentially consuming legacy media.
Yeah.
And I think legacy media is able to paint a very, very different narrative than what's happening. And if you meet someone who consumes legacy media as their main source versus someone who does their own research, like on X, YouTube, Rumble, whatever platform, Nostr, Protocol, they live in totally different realities.
Yeah, man.
Right?
And you can tell usually within a minute.
Yeah.
Usually within a minute.
They live in totally different realities, man. But the future's bright. You know, Bitcoin fixes these things. I think it's going to be a hell of a fight. And last question I'll ask you, Adam, is what is the future of Bitcoin well, man? Like, what are you planning on, you know, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line?
Oh, I love that. Dude, I love thinking about 10 years down the line because that's what we're building for. Like, I think I've got 4 kids. I've got an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And when I think 10 years down the line, they're all teenagers, which blows my mind. And they're all going to need to be meaningfully interacting with the world and with the economy. And we're building a world where they never once have to think, where's my money? Because they have some, because they're working and producing in the world. But also they have custody of their money. But they can still interact with the real world, interact with the current world. I know that 3 years ago, we had maulers on stage, like at the Bitcoin conference, you know, super jacked up. You want to go to Chipotle and Walmart? Like, you do that. Pay with your Bitcoin. It's like, that's not coming to USA for decades. Like, we are so far away from corporate America adopting Bitcoin in any meaningful way. I went to El Salvador. I was surprised at how well it worked, but also shocked at how little anyone knew about, like, it's like, you know, listen to this. Puedo pagar con Bitcoin. There's my Spanish. And it's like, get the Bitcoin phone. Someone's got to get it dusted off, like turn it on. Oh, it's out of batteries. Let's plug it. Like, it's not a good experience. No one's using it down there. And that, like, you know, up until recently, it was legal tender. It was like part of the thing. And so we are so far away. And I want to build a platform for the early adopters, for the ones that are class of 2030. When you're still very early in 2030, I firmly believe this. I want to build a spot for you to be a freedom maxi. Like, our mission is to enable independence. You should have the ability to hold and control your money and be able to use it. And, you know, we're currently in this current system, we have a dilemma. You can either hold your money in cash. That's the only way you can hold your money. Or you can use your money in a bank. I don't know about what it's like here, but I know that I've got a really hard time paying for anything in Canada with cash. Like, you can't buy a car with cash. You can't buy obviously a house with cash. Like, I went to the street or down the street from the office to buy a sandwich with a $50 bill. They were like, we don't take 50s. Like, I was like, what? Like, the sandwich is $13. You don't have $30 to give me back? Like, this is ridiculous. And so when you're forced with hold your money or use your money, you're obviously going to choose use because it's holding you can't use. And it creates negative incentives. And so I want to build a world and a platform that allows people to hold and use their money. And that means we're a conduit to the, you know, traditional fiat world. If you want to pay your credit cards with Bitcoin, no problem. You want to send money to your friend, no problem. You want to, have your paycheck deposited and then buy Bitcoin and send it self-custody, no problem. But we're doing this the hard way because I'm building this for my kids. Like, the user growth and stuff, we're public, like, our investors would be very unpleased if I only thought about the 10 years. So obviously we're working very hard to make sure that, number go up in the short term. But at the end of the day, I'm building a platform that I'm going to be very proud that my kids use, not because, daddy built it, but because it's just the best platform to have the ability to interact with the fiat world through Bitcoin and self-custody.
Amazing. Well, Adam O'Brien, thank you so much for joining me on Simply Bitcoin IRL. Appreciate it, bro.
Appreciate it, man.